Good morning. My name is Michael Paestella, and I am currently a senior at Oswego High School. With the upcoming school budget vote slated for Tuesday, May 21st, we here at WBUC wanted to meet with our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Raymond Kilmer, to discuss the proposed budget plan. Good morning, Dr. Kilmer. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Michael. I'm glad to be here.
As the date draws near when the public will vote on the 2024-2025 school year's budget, can you explain to us the steps you take to develop a budget proposal?
Sure. So a budget calendar really begins very early in a school year. And honestly, once one budget is passed, we're already thinking about the next. And so we spend time talking with our staff, the Board of Education, and the administrators. And so this year, when I came on board in September, we talked to the board about development of budget guidelines, budget priorities, and that allows us to look back on what are the core principles that we're looking back to as we develop a budget. Then we had budget meetings with all of our school building administrators and our department leaders. Again, going back to who's closest to students, what their needs are, and then how do we develop a budget to support that?
So speaking of these priorities, what were some of the priorities that you identified for the development of this 2024-2025 proposed school budget?
Sure. So not only during my interview process when I was hired, but in my conversations with board members, with students, with staff, and community, there's a couple items that came up over and over again that were really key factors. One was maintaining our academic programming across the board. Two, enhancements in safety and security. And three, the social and emotional health of our students. And so as we developed this year's budget, those three pieces were key in our development.
Can you help us understand the three parts of a budget that typically go into a school budget and any changes that were made to these three parts this year? Or what is the total proposed budget and how the funds will be allocated?
Sure. So next year's proposed budget is just over $112 million. New York State mandated that districts present their budget in three parts. Those parts are administrative, capital, and program. When you look at budgets, you should be comparing what are proportionality of our budget. So when you think about program is the part of the budget that is closest to our students. And so that should be the largest piece of the pie. This year is about 75%, and that's right where you want to see it, or a little bit higher. On the administrative side of things, the administrative budget should be about 10% or lower. This year, we are a little bit lower. And then on capital, you want to be about 15%, which again, that's where we are, right around 15%. You'll notice in the administrative budget, there is a slight decrease. We actually eliminated an administrative position. It was the Assistant Director of Business and Finance. That position was vacated and we chose not to fill it. Again, with a focus back to students first.
So now that we've kind of gone through the parts of the budget, can you summarize what all of this may mean for the taxpayers and the community?
Sure. So this year, we're asking for a 3.17% increase in the tax levy. Now, when you think about a school budget is revenue driven. And we have three main sources of revenue as a district. And only one do we have any influence on. So our state aid is about 51% of the total budget. The pilots and other sources is about another 25%. And then the tax levy is the final quarter. And the tax levy is what we ask our community to contribute to the school budget. And so this year, as I said before, we're asking for a 3.17% increase, which is about $850,000 more than last year.
So you've mentioned how a budget, when you make it, it's not only just for next year, but also has to take the next few years into account. So you've mentioned this at past board meetings, and so can you expand on this vision that a budget isn't just for next school year, but is for the next 5 in some ways as well?
Sure. So as I stated before, a budget is really revenue driven. And since we only have control of what we ask the taxpayers to pay, there's a huge variability about what aid we may get from New York State. And so anytime we're developing a budget, we have to position ourselves for maintaining programmings in the following year, but also future years. So if we're faced with a situation where state aid doesn't come in where we would hope or at the level of funding that we would expect, we have some flexibility within the budget to absorb some of that cost to not hurt programmings that support kids.
So is there any other information that you would like to share with the residents of Oswego about the proposed budget for the 2024-2025 school year?
I think, if anything, I would ask our community to focus in on some of the key areas, those priorities that I talked about at the beginning. And so when we heard about school safety and maintaining that safe environment, I had a number of conversations with Oswego City Police Department Chief Phil Cady and my community members in looking for where there was need. And so in this budget, we've actually added 2 additional SROs to help support our students and families in our elementary schools. In this year's budget, we had 2 SROs at the high school, 1 at the middle school, and then we had 1 floater between our 5 elementary schools. Throughout the course of this year, he's done a fantastic job, but clearly needs some additional support. And so we're excited to add those 2. When we look at the priority of social and emotional health, we were looking for ways to try to increase that staffing. And so we've added a district-wide psychologist to this year's budget, and then we've also added a social worker to the budget as well. And then finally, one of the big pieces was about maintaining program. I think many people understand that during COVID, the federal government gave school districts significant funding through grants. And we actually had 27 positions that were all paid for by those grants. Those grants come to an end next school year. And so we needed to find a way to find funding within our general fund to pay those positions. And so the way we developed this budget, all of those positions are saved. That includes a psychologist, 5 elementary counselors, 4 special education teachers, and a number of teaching assistants. And so we're very proud that we've been able to maintain programming in this proposed budget. In addition, this year we have a capital outlay project, and that's new for the district. And a capital outlay project allows us to do some facility work while also benefiting us in aid that we get back from the state. And so this year, we've added a $100,000 capital outlay project that's targeted actually at Riley Elementary School to make some much needed improvements to some of the entrances, specifically doors, and some camera work. And so we feel like that will really place great emphasis on safety and security in that building and look to continue that work in the future.
So additionally, on the ballot this year, people will see other propositions besides the budget. Could you summarize what those are for us?
Absolutely. Well, Michael, one is near and dear to your heart. Yeah. You act as the ex officio board member, a student board member. We have to bring a proposition to the community every other year asking for permission to have that seat. The voters don't vote on who takes that seat, but it allows the board to establish that. We also have a transportation or bus replacement plan. So we're looking to add 9 additional buses this year. That is part of our replacement plan. That cost is a little over $1.5 million. But when you account for state aid and then what we get for a replacement value when we trade in that bus, the actual cost to our taxpayers is closer to about $36,000 per year. In addition to that, we have 2 board members who are running for 2 open seats. And then we also have on our ballot every year our public library, not only their tax levy, but also the trustees.
If people in the community have any more questions about the budget that weren't answered during this segment, where should they go?
Well, they could email me. I'm rkilmer@oswego.org, or they can go to the website, oswego.org, go to business and budget, and all the documentation, including our presentations from board meetings, is there.
If the voters didn't approve of the budget, what comes next?
Well, if the voters don't pass the budget, we have 2 options. Option 1, we go back to the board, and they could decide to put the budget up for vote again. We could put the same budget back up, we could make some tweaks and put it up again, and then go back to the community for a vote. or they could adopt a contingency. And a contingency means that we would have to move forward with a 0% tax levy increase. But it also then limits access to our buildings and facilities. So for instance, for any outside organization to use our facilities, there can't be any cost to the taxpayer whatsoever. And so we would have to develop a system where every cost or variable was billed to that particular unit. There are some other limitations in a contingency budget as well.
I would like to thank Superintendent of Schools Dr. Raymond Kilmer for joining us today, for being transparent and sharing this information so that all Oswego residents have accurate information. Please make sure that you are aware of the voting locations so that you can support our students, staff, and community in making our district a top-performing district. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Michael.
This concludes our informational sharing session today. To the Oswego community, we appreciate your anticipated votes on Tuesday, May 21st. Have a great day, Oswego.